I was the third wheel in my own marriage. Not anymore.
When I started dating Michelle 3 years ago, she mentioned Derek constantly, like every third sentence somehow circled back to him. Derek said this. Derek thinks that. Derek and I used to do whatever. I figured it was normal because everyone has that one ride-or-die friend from college they're still tight with. I had my buddy Jake, who I'd known since elementary school, so I understood the importance of maintaining friendships. I wasn't intimidated. I was being the cool, secure boyfriend who doesn't get jealous because he's emotionally mature and definitely not worried about some random dude his girlfriend keeps bringing up every 5 seconds. Spoiler alert, I should have been worried. The first major red flag appeared about 3 months into our relationship when Michelle and I were planning a weekend trip to the mountains. I'm talking romantic getaway with hiking, stargazing, maybe some campfire situations, the whole deal. I'd booked this incredible cabin with a hot tub and everything, spent weeks researching the perfect spot. Then Michelle says, completely casual, like she's asking about the weather forecast, should we invite Derek and his wife Sarah? I said I kind of thought this was just us, a couples thing. And she hit me with the look. You know that specific look that says you're being unreasonable for wanting alone time with your own girlfriend. She explained Derek was going through a rough patch at work and could really use the break. And besides, it would be fun to have another couple there. Before I could properly object, our romantic weekend had transformed into a double date I never agreed to. That should have been my exit ramp right there. But here's the kicker. I was already completely in love with her. Michelle had this way of making you feel like the center of her universe, at least when Derek wasn't physically present. She laughed at my jokes, listened to my stories about difficult coworkers, made me feel genuinely seen and valued. So I ignored the Derek-shaped elephant in the room and convinced myself it was fine. Lots of couples hang out with other couples regularly. This was normal adult behavior. I was being dramatic and possessive, except it wasn't just occasional double dates or group hangouts. Derek was literally everywhere in our lives, and I mean everywhere. He'd text Michelle at 10 at night asking if she'd seen some documentary on Netflix that he wanted to discuss. He'd call during our dinner dates because he needed her opinion on which car to buy. When we got a dog, this adorable golden retriever puppy I'd been dreaming about for years, Michelle insisted we FaceTime Derek so he could help us pick a name. I'd wanted to name him something strong like Maverick or Zeus, but apparently Derek's vote counted more than mine. We ended up naming the dog Biscuit because Derek thought it was classic and friendly. The grocery shopping situation was what really started getting to me, though. We're talking about vegetables and toilet paper here, people. Basic domestic necessities. But Michelle would text Derek photos from the cereal aisle asking his opinion on whether we should try some new granola brand. Or she'd call him from Costco asking if he thought we needed the industrial-sized pack of paper towels. I'm standing there holding the shopping cart like some kind of pack mule while my wife consults her real husband on our household purchasing decisions. It was absolutely insane when I actually stopped to think about it. And Michelle talked about Derek like he was some kind of mythical creature who could do absolutely no wrong. According to her, Derek was brilliant, like genuinely genius-level intelligent. He was kind, thoughtful, successful, hilarious, basically a perfect combination of Einstein, some superhero, and whoever won the Nobel Peace Prize that year. Every story about him ended with, "Isn't that amazing?" or "He's just so insightful." Meanwhile, when I'd accomplished something significant at work or fixed that leaky faucet she'd been complaining about for weeks, I'd get a distracted, "That's nice, babe," while she scrolled through her phone, probably texting Derek about something. The worst part was watching Sarah Moore, Derek's actual legal wife, every time we'd all hang out together. Which was constantly, by the way, because apparently Michelle and I were now a package deal with them. Sarah would sit there with this expression that I can only describe as resigned misery, like someone who'd accepted their fate years ago, but wasn't remotely happy about it. She'd smile politely when Derek talked, nod at appropriate moments, but her eyes had this glazed-over quality, like she'd mentally checked out long ago and was just going through the motions of existing. Sometimes I'd catch her staring into her wine glass like it held answers to questions she was too exhausted to ask anymore. I genuinely felt bad for Sarah. Here we were, both married to people who seemed significantly more interested in each other than in us. At least I was starting to wake up to the reality of my situation. Sarah looked like she'd been living in this weird friendship purgatory for so long that she'd forgotten what an actual marriage was supposed to feel like. We were both just supporting characters in Derek and Michelle's relationship. The moment I truly understood how completely screwed I was came about a year into my marriage to Michelle. We were at our apartment, the place where my wife and I live together as a married couple, and I made some comment about maybe taking a weekend trip somewhere, just the two of us. Michelle got immediately excited and said we should see if Derek and Sarah want to come because Derek knows this amazing place in Vermont. And right then, watching her face literally light up at the prospect of including Derek in yet another aspect of our lives, it hit me like a freight truck. I wasn't Michelle's partner. I was the other guy, the backup option, the convenient husband who was there to split rent and provide companionship when her real soulmate wasn't available for whatever reason. Derek was embedded in our text messages, our vacation plans, our grocery lists, our dog's name, our everything. He'd somehow infiltrated every single corner of my marriage, and I'd just passively let it happen because I didn't want to be the jealous, insecure husband. I used to think Derek was just harmlessly annoying, like a mosquito at a summer barbecue, or that one coworker who talks way too loud on phone calls, irritating but manageable. But sitting there in my own living room watching my wife enthusiastically plan our life around another man's schedule and preferences, I realized something that made my blood run genuinely cold. I hadn't just married Michelle. I'd married into whatever weird codependent situation she had with Derek Banks. And somewhere along the way, without even noticing it happening, I'd become the third wheel in my own marriage. Last summer, around late June, when the weather was oppressively hot, Michelle came up with what she called a brilliant idea. Those two words coming out of her mouth were never a good sign. Kind of like when your boss says, "Can we talk?" or when your dentist gets real quiet during a cleaning. But I was still deep in my trying to make this marriage work phase, so I smiled and asked what she had in mind. "You and Derek should hang out," she said, like she'd just solved world hunger. "Just the two of you, a guy's night out." I almost choked on my coffee. "A guy's night with Derek?" "Yes," she said, getting excited now, doing that thing where she bounced a little on her toes like a kid proposing a trip to an amusement park. "You two have never really bonded one-on-one. I think if you spent some quality time together without me and Sarah there, you'd realize how much you actually have in common." What I wanted to say was, "Michelle, the only thing Derek and I have in common is that we're both inexplicably involved with you, and only one of us signed legal paperwork for that privilege." What I actually said was, "Sure, sounds great, because that's what you do when you're married, right? You compromise. You do things that make your spouse happy, even when those things sound about as appealing as a root canal performed by a dentist who learned their skills from YouTube videos." Michelle set the whole thing up like she was organizing a peace summit between rival nations. She picked the bar, some trendy brewery downtown that served IPAs with pretentious names. She texted me an actual list of conversation topics I should bring up, which included Derek's job in PR, his thoughts on some recent Marvel movie, and his feelings about electric cars. It was literally like getting homework for a friendship I didn't want and hadn't asked for. The night arrived faster than I would have liked. I met Derek at the brewery at 7, and he was already there sitting at the bar in expensive khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my entire outfit. He waved when he saw me. This big, enthusiastic wave like we were old buddies meeting up after years apart, not two guys who'd been forced into proximity by a woman who couldn't understand appropriate boundaries. "Ryan, my man!" He clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise. "Michelle told me you finally agreed to this. Took you long enough." I forced a laugh and sat down next to him. "Yeah, well, you know how it is. Busy with work and stuff." Derek went on about how insane work had been lately, handling 3 major accounts, his boss piling more responsibilities on him. The bartender came over and Derek ordered some craft beer with a name I immediately forgot. I ordered a regular lager because I'm not pretentious about my alcohol. Here's the thing about forced social situations. They're painfully awkward for the first 30 minutes until alcohol smooths everything over. Derek and I made stilted small talk about work, sports, the weather, all the greatest hits of male conversation when you don't actually know each other beyond forced proximity. He told me about his PR job, which apparently involved managing client expectations and synergizing brand narratives, which I'm pretty sure was fancy talk for lying to people professionally. By the 3rd round, which, yes, I paid for because apparently Derek had conveniently forgotten his wallet in his car and the parking was so far away, things started getting loose. Derek's face was flushed, his eyes slightly glassy, and he was leaning into my personal space like we were conspiring about something important. "Can I tell you something, Ryan?" His breath smelled like hops and questionable decisions. "Sure, man," I said, taking a sip of my beer and preparing myself for whatever bonding moment Michelle had probably coached him to have with me. Derek looked around like he was about to reveal classified information, then leaned in closer. "You ever get bored of loyalty?" I blinked. "What?" He laughed this weird, nervous laugh that didn't match the seriousness of the question. "Like being loyal to one person? You ever just get tired of it?" This was absolutely not the conversation I'd expected. I thought we'd talk about football or complain about our jobs or bond over literally anything normal. Instead, Derek was giving me some weird philosophical question that sounded like it came from a guy having a midlife crisis at 35. "I mean, I guess everyone has moments where they're frustrated," I said carefully, trying to figure out where this was going. "Right." Derek slapped the bar like I just validated his entire existence. "Exactly. Everyone gets frustrated. Everyone wants something different sometimes." He took a long drink of his beer, then set it down hard. "So here's the thing, and you can't tell anyone this, okay? Not Michelle, not Sarah, nobody." My internal alarm bells were ringing so loud I'm surprised Derek couldn't hear them. "Okay. I'm seeing someone," he said casually, like he was telling me he'd tried a new restaurant. "Her name's Amanda. She works in our PR firm, handles the tech accounts. We've been hooking up for about 6 months now." I sat there completely frozen, my beer halfway to my mouth, processing what I'd just heard. Derek Banks, the man my wife spoke about like he was incapable of moral failure, was casually confessing to cheating on his wife, on Sarah, who already looked dead inside most days. "We mostly meet at this hotel downtown," Derek continued, apparently taking my stunned silence as encouragement. "The Marriott on 5th Street. I set up a burner email account specifically for booking rooms. Sarah doesn't know about it, obviously. Amanda's single, so it's not complicated for her, but man, keeping it secret is exhausting." He laughed again. "Worth it, though. She's amazing. Way more exciting than—" He stopped himself, but we both knew what he was about to say. I was still staring at him, my face probably doing some combination of shock and disgust that I was desperately trying to hide. This was the guy Michelle thought was perfect, the one she consulted about every major life decision. This supposedly amazing human being was cheating on his wife in a mid-tier hotel chain using a burner email like he was in some kind of spy movie. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally managed to ask. Derek shrugged, taking another drink. "I don't know, man. I figured you'd get it. You're married, too. You understand how it is. Same person, same routine, day after day. Sometimes you need something different to feel alive, you know?" No, I did not know. What I knew was that I was sitting next to a complete scumbag who thought we were somehow kindred spirits because we both made the mistake of getting involved with people in the same friend group. What I knew was that Sarah deserved so much better than this. What I knew was that I now had information that could blow up multiple lives, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with it. "Right," I said, nodding like those bobblehead dogs people put in their car windows. I kept nodding and smiling while Derek continued giving me details I absolutely didn't ask for. Which hotels had better loyalty programs, how he deletes texts immediately, his whole elaborate system for covering his tracks. He genuinely thought I'd be impressed. He believed he was sharing valuable guy talk with someone who'd appreciate his cunning and his ability to juggle 2 women simultaneously. We closed out the tab around 11. Again, I paid because Derek's wallet was still supposedly in his car. The next morning, my phone rang at 8. It was Derek, and he sounded like death. "Ryan, hey, about last night." His voice was hoarse, panicked. "I was really drunk. I said some things I shouldn't have." "Yeah, you did." "I need you to promise me you won't tell anyone. Not Michelle. Definitely not Sarah. Please, man, it would ruin everything." I sat there in bed, Michelle still sleeping peacefully next to me, and thought about it. I could tell Sarah right now. I could blow up Derek's life, expose him for the fraud he was. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the pathetic way he sounded. Maybe it was because I wasn't ready for the nuclear fallout that would inevitably follow. Or maybe, even back then, some part of me knew this secret was valuable, that someday, somehow, this information might come in extremely handy. "Fine," I said. "I won't tell anyone." Derek exhaled like I'd just saved his life. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I owe you." He hung up and I lay there staring at the ceiling, holding a grenade with the pin pulled out, wondering when I'd eventually need to throw it. Fast forward to a random Tuesday morning in September. I'd just gotten back from the gym, one of the few activities I did alone without Michelle trying to turn it into a group event, and I was looking forward to a hot shower before logging on for work. I'm talking about that sacred post-workout shower where you stand under the water and contemplate life while your muscles stop screaming at you. I stripped down, got the water to that perfect temperature where it's almost too hot but not quite, and stepped in. I was maybe 3 minutes into shampooing my hair, eyes closed, completely vulnerable, when I heard the apartment door open. My first thought was that Michelle had come home early from her morning meeting. No big deal. I kept washing my hair, doing that thing where you massage your scalp because some article said it promotes hair growth. Then I heard a male voice call out, "Hello? Anyone home?" Derek. Derek Banks had just walked into my apartment while I was completely exposed and soapy in the shower using his spare key. I froze like a deer in headlights, except wetter and significantly more exposed. Our shower has a glass door, one of those modern ones Michelle insisted we install, which meant there was zero privacy. I was basically in a transparent box, and Derek was somewhere in my apartment, probably helping himself to my coffee. "Ryan, you here?" His voice was getting closer. "I'm in the shower," I yelled, frantically trying to rinse this shampoo out of my hair while simultaneously figuring out how to preserve what was left of my dignity. "Oh, sorry, man," he said, but he didn't leave. I could hear him in the hallway right outside the bathroom. "Michelle asked me to grab her laptop. She left it here, said you wouldn't mind." Of course she did. Of course, Michelle had dispatched her faithful sidekick to invade our home without bothering to mention it to me. The person who actually lived here, paid half the rent, and was currently undressed and vulnerable. "Can you wait in the living room?" I shouted over the water. Yeah, no problem." When I finally got out and wrapped a towel around myself, I found Derek sitting on our couch, scrolling through his phone, Michelle's laptop already tucked under his arm. He looked up when I walked in, my hair still dripping, and had the audacity to grin. "Sorry about that, buddy. Michelle said you'd still be at the gym." Buddy. He called me buddy while sitting in my living room after nearly catching me not fully clothed. "Derek," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and measured like a hostage negotiator, "maybe next time you could text first before you use the key." His face shifted, this tiny micro-expression of offense like I'd just criticized his mother. "Oh yeah, sure, I didn't think it was a big deal. It's just, this is my home, you know? I'd appreciate a heads up." "Right, totally." But his tone had completely changed. He stood up, clutching the laptop. "I'll just tell Michelle you said hi." That evening, Michelle came home with the energy of a prosecutor who'd just been handed a slam-dunk case. She didn't even say hello, just walked in, set down her bag, and turned to face me with her arms crossed. "So I heard you embarrassed Derek today?" I looked up from my laptop where I'd been answering emails. "I embarrassed him?" "He said you made him feel unwelcome in our home, a home where he's always been welcome." She said it like I'd committed a war crime. "Michelle, he walked in while I was in the shower. I just asked him to text first next time. He was doing me a favor. I needed my laptop for a client presentation. He went out of his way to help me, and you made him feel like a criminal." This was unbelievable. Actually, no. It was completely believable, which was somehow worse. I didn't make him feel like a criminal. I asked for basic courtesy. That's normal. What's normal is trusting your friends. Derek has a key for emergencies. He's been nothing but supportive of our relationship, and this is how you treat him. What I didn't expect was for Michelle to invite Derek over that same night for what she called a conversation to clear the air. What actually happened was a full-blown intervention where I was the defendant and my crime was having basic boundaries. They sat on the couch together while I sat in the armchair across from them like I was being interviewed for a job I didn't apply for. Derek had this wounded expression on his face, and Michelle looked like a disappointed parent about to explain why my behavior was unacceptable. "Ryan," Michelle started, her voice dripping with condescending patience, "Derek and I have been talking, and we feel like you might be struggling with some insecurity issues." "Insecurity issues?" I repeated. "I'm insecure because I didn't want unexpected visitors while I was not wearing anything?" "I'm not insecure. I just want privacy in my own home." Derek leaned forward, doing his best impression of a concerned friend. "I get it, man. Change is hard. Michelle and I have been close for years, and sometimes when someone new enters the picture, it can feel threatening." Someone new. I was the someone new in my own marriage. This continued for 45 excruciating minutes of them tag-teaming me with therapy speak and passive-aggressive observations about my character. They brought up times I'd been cold to Derek at dinner parties, moments where I'd chosen to do things without including him, my general failure to appreciate his constant presence in our lives. By the end, I was completely exhausted. Arguing with Michelle was like playing chess with someone who kept changing the rules. Finally, Michelle delivered the ending blow. I think you owe Derek an apology, a real one, in his home, in front of Sarah, so he knows you're serious about making this right and restoring harmony. I stared at her, then at Derek, who was nodding like this was a completely reasonable request. They wanted me to go to Derek's house and apologize to him in front of his wife for the crime of asking him to text before entering my apartment. And that's when something clicked in my brain. That's when I stopped seeing this as an annoying conflict and started seeing it as an opportunity. I had information about Derek's hotel visits and burner emails and his friend Amanda from the PR firm, information that could absolutely restore harmony, just not the kind Michelle was imagining. I smiled, and I know it probably looked terrifying given the context. You're right, I said. I should apologize. Let's set it up for this Saturday. I want to do this properly. Michelle's face lit up like I'd just agreed to donate a kidney. Derek looked relieved. Neither of them had any idea what kind of apology I was planning. The moment I agreed, Michelle transformed into a director, preparing her lead actor for the performance of a lifetime. She spent the next 2 days turning me into a trained SEAL. Wednesday morning, she woke me up at 6:30 with a notepad and coffee. I've been thinking about the apology, she said. It needs to hit specific emotional beats. You need to acknowledge your jealousy, admit your insecurity, and thank Derek for being so patient with you. For the next hour, Michelle walked me through what she called the perfect apology structure. She had bullet points, talking points, suggestions for my tone of voice, earnest but not desperate, humble but not pathetic. I wrote it all down dutifully. Thursday was dedicated to what Michelle called physical preparation. She made me practice my humble face in the bathroom mirror. I'm not kidding. We stood there together while she coached me on the optimal expression of remorse. Eyebrows up a little, not too much. You're reflective, not surprised. Now soften your mouth. You're open, receptive. While she was busy documenting my humiliation, I was mentally writing my own version of Saturday's speech. Every time she told me to say I'm sorry, I was thinking about Derek's confession at the bar. Friday afternoon, while Michelle was at work, I sat down and actually wrote out what I was going to say. Not the sanitized version Michelle wanted, but the truth bomb I was about to drop. I saved it in a folder labeled tax documents because Michelle avoided anything financial related like the plague. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for season finales. Michelle spent an hour getting ready, even though she wasn't the one performing. She kept checking my outfit, adjusting my collar, making sure I looked appropriately humble. We drove to Derek and Sarah's townhouse in Michelle's car because she insisted arriving together shows unity. The whole drive over, she coached me on my breathing, telling me to stay calm and centered. Derek and Sarah lived in one of those cookie-cutter townhouses where every third house has the same beige paint and sad shrubs. We pulled up at exactly 7 because Michelle insisted punctuality shows respect. Derek opened the door before we even knocked. Dressed up in nice jeans and a crisp white shirt, his hair gelled back. His smile was huge, like he thought he'd won something. Sarah appeared from the kitchen carrying a cheese tray that looked like she'd spent time arranging it. She was wearing a nice dress, her hair done, makeup on. She'd dressed up for my apology to her husband. We settled into the living room, Derek and Sarah on their couch, Michelle and me on the love seat across from them. The coffee table between us held Sarah's cheese tray, wine glasses, and a bottle of red. The stage was set. Michelle squeezed my hand encouragingly. Derek leaned back with his arms spread across the couch, looking like a king about to receive tribute. Sarah sat with her hands folded in her lap, looking sweet and hopeful and completely unprepared. So, Derek started, I really appreciate you coming here tonight, Ryan. It takes a big man to admit when he's wrong. I nodded solemnly. You're right. It does. Michelle squeezed my hand harder, her signal that I should begin. I took a deep breath. Derek, I began, my voice measured and sincere. I want to start by saying that I've done a lot of thinking over the past few days about my behavior, about my reactions, about how I've been handling our friendship. Derek nodded encouragingly, eating this up. I realize now that I've been dealing with some insecurity. Having you and Michelle be so close, triggered something in me, some fear or jealousy that I wasn't even fully aware of. I paused, looking down at my hands like I was gathering emotional strength. This was the script Michelle had written, and I was delivering it flawlessly. And that's not fair to you. You've been nothing but supportive of our relationship. You've been patient with me, welcoming, generous with your time and your friendship. Ryan, Derek started, but I held up my hand. Please, let me finish. This is important. I looked at Michelle, who was practically glowing. Then I looked at Sarah, whose expression was soft and sympathetic. Finally, I looked at Derek. Your friendship means the world to Michelle, and by extension, it should mean the world to me. You've been there for her, for us, in ways that I haven't fully appreciated. Derek was nodding so hard I thought his head might fall off. Which is why, I continued, standing up slowly, I want to do this right. And then I did it. I dropped to one knee right there in their living room. Michelle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Derek's chest literally puffed up. Sarah looked confused but touched. They thought I was going full dramatic apology, really selling the remorse. They had no idea. Derek, I said, my voice still perfectly sincere, I want to thank you for your infinite patience, for your guidance, for being such an incredible friend that Michelle trusts you with everything. I paused, watching his face light up with satisfaction. Then I turned to Sarah. Actually, Sarah, my real apology is to you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Derek's affair last summer. Time stopped. You could hear the candle flickering in the kitchen. Michelle's mouth fell open. Derek's face went from peacock proud to absolute horror in half a second, all the color draining like someone pulled a plug. Sarah just blinked, her brain trying to process what I'd just said. What? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Ryan, what the heck are you? Derek found his voice first. Last summer, I continued, still on one knee, Derek and I went out for drinks. You remember, Michelle? The guys' night you set up so we could bond? Well, we bonded. Derek told me all about Amanda from his PR firm, about the hotel rooms at the Marriott on 5th Street, about his burner email account he uses to book the rooms so you wouldn't find out, Sarah. You're lying! Trevor was on his feet now, his voice shaking. He's lying, Sarah. He's making this up because he's jealous. And I pulled out my phone. I'm not making anything up. You texted me the next morning, remember? Begging me not to tell anyone. I held up my phone, showing the screen to everyone. There it was. Derek's text from that hungover Sunday morning. Thanks for being cool about last night, bro. What I told you stays between us, right? Never mention it again. Sarah stood up slowly and took my phone from my hand. She stared at the screen, reading the messages over and over. Derek! Her voice cracked on his name. Baby, I can explain. He reached for her, but she stepped back. You told him, Sarah said, her voice getting stronger now, anger replacing shock. You bragged about it to him. I was drunk. I didn't mean... Is it true? She cut him off, her eyes boring into him. Is there an Amanda? Is there a hotel? Derek's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Michelle desperately, like she could somehow save him. But Michelle was still frozen, watching her perfect friend reveal himself to be exactly what I'd known he was all along. Answer her, I said, standing up finally. Is it true, Derek? The silence stretched on forever. Finally, Derek's shoulders slumped, and that was all the confirmation anyone needed. Sarah dropped my phone on the coffee table. Get out, she said to Derek. Sarah, please. Get out! She was screaming now, tears streaming down her face. Get out of this house right now! This is my house, too. I don't care. Get out before I call the police. Derek looked around wildly, at his wife falling apart, at Michelle, who looked shell-shocked, at me standing there calm as could be. You, he said, pointing at me with a shaking finger. You did this. You ruined everything. No, Derek, I replied. You ruined everything. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I looked at Michelle. I think we should go. She didn't move, still processing. Michelle, I said again, softer. Let's go. She finally stood up like a zombie, and I guided her toward the door. Behind us, Sarah was sobbing and Derek was pleading. We stepped out into the cool evening air, and I closed the door, muffling the sounds of their imploding marriage. Apology delivered. The drive home was the kind of silent that makes horror movies feel cozy. Michelle sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window like she was watching her entire worldview crumble in real time. When we got to the apartment, Michelle went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. Not slammed, closed. Somehow that was worse. I made myself a sandwich and settled onto the couch. My phone exploded with texts from Michelle's friends. "Marcus, what the heck did you just do? How could you embarrass them like that?" I responded to each one with a screenshot of Derek's confession text and the suggestion to ask him about Amanda. By 10, the messages mostly stopped as the screenshots made their rounds. Around 10:30, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize saying what I did took guts. That night, Sarah emailed me. She thanked me for telling her the truth. After we left, she'd confronted Derek and demanded his phone. When he refused, she knew I was right. While he was at work the next day, she went through his laptop and found everything. The email account, hotel confirmations, messages with Amanda going back 8 months, photos. She'd contacted a divorce attorney and was filing that week. She thanked me. At least one person thought I did the right thing. Michelle emerged around 11. Everyone was asking her if she knew, if she was covering for him. She was shocked. She'd had no idea. When she found out I'd known since last summer, she was furious. I explained that Derek begged me not to tell anyone. I figured if I was going to ruin everything, I'd do it on my own terms. She accused me of purposely destroying them. I admitted she was right, just like she'd purposely made our marriage about Derek, purposely prioritized his feelings over mine, purposely tried to humiliate me. She went back to the bedroom and locked the door. The next few days were brutal. Michelle blasted breakup songs at concert volume, rearranged furniture, took down our photos. Wednesday morning, I realized the lease was in my name. Michelle had moved in after we got married but was never added to the lease. I called my landlord Frank about eviction procedures. He walked me through it. I needed to give 30 days written notice. Friday, I typed up a formal eviction notice and left it on the kitchen counter. When Michelle found it that evening, she was furious. "You're evicting me from our apartment?" I explained it was my apartment. She wasn't on the lease, and one of us needed to leave. She had 30 days. The next 2 weeks were psychological warfare. Passive-aggressive notes everywhere, unplugged phone chargers, reorganized kitchen. On day 23, I came home to find her packing my stuff. My TV, my PlayStation. When I stopped her, she claimed half of everything was hers. I told her she could take the left half of the TV if we got a saw. She backed down. On day 30, I woke to find Michelle gone. All her belongings vanished. She left her key on the counter with a note saying goodbye. I had my apartment back. Over the next 6 months, I watched both their lives implode through social media. Derek lost his house in the divorce, pays significant alimony, got demoted at work, lives in a tiny studio apartment. Amanda transferred offices. His friends abandoned him, calling him Mr. Integrity, ironically. Michelle moved back with her parents at 32, works at her dad's office doing admin work. She tried spinning the story online, but people had screenshots. She still blames me and defends Derek's mistake. 3 months after Michelle moved out, Sarah texted asking to grab coffee. We met downtown and it was easy. No drama, just 2 people who survived the same disaster. One coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into real conversations. We're taking things slow, but it's healthy. We both learned what we don't want and what we do want. Clear communication, actual boundaries, someone who prioritizes you. Sarah and I are planning to move in together next month. New place, new locks. Nobody has spare keys but us. We're talking about getting a dog. Something strong like Titan or Atlas. Sarah said we should both agree on it together like adults. Imagine that. 2 people making decisions together without consulting a third party. The craziest part is I genuinely thought I was the problem for so long. Michelle had me convinced that wanting privacy was jealousy, that basic respect was insecurity. It took that truth bomb to realize I wasn't crazy. I was just in a crazy situation. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Every single time. Sarah deserved to know the truth. I deserved to stop living a lie, and Derek and Michelle deserved exactly what they got. That apology Michelle wanted so badly? I delivered it. Just not to the person she expected, and not for the reasons she imagined. But it was sincere, necessary, and long overdue. Best apology I ever gave.